This week, we are waking up to a story that broke out about what some scholars are calling the civility industrial complex. We couldn't stop thinking about it because there's a real difference between using civility to shut someone up or using it to actually stay in the room with them. Today, we're talking about civility and how to tell those two things apart. So, welcome to White Women Wake Up. I'm Karen.
And I'm Jonelle.
Each week, one of us brings a topic to the table, something we've been wrestling with, reading about, or noticing in our own lives.
And the other reacts in real time. No scripts, no prep, just honest conversation between a mother and a daughter, spanning multiple generations, about what it means to wake up as a white woman in a world shaped by bias, power, and inherited privilege.
We don't always agree, and it's not always comfortable, but we show up anyways. Let's wake up.
Let's wake up.
Hey,
Hi,
Jonelle.
Karen, how are you?
I'm good. Hey, lots of, before we get into any kind of reflections,
Yes.
I would like to announce the book club coming up.
Yep. So we just had a book club a couple weeks ago. And then our new one for September is Crank. And I didn't look up the author's name. Pause. Did you do that?
No, I
No. We both, but you can find it on our website. We both did not prep for that one, but the book is Crank. I started it. It's an interesting, it's about a woman, and I believe it's teenagers' battle with crack cocaine. And the book is really interesting because it's written in more of like almost short haiku and not really, again.
Yeah, that's what I heard Becky said, poetry. Yeah.
Oh, she did say poetry. Oh, great. I was like,
Yeah.
Becky will kill me because it's probably not. And it's just my interpretation. I'm not a literary scholar by any means, but it is it reminds me of when I was in school, Seattle Public Schools. We had a lot of creative. I was in one of my English classes, we did what was called a golden thread, where you dropped the words wherever they felt they should land on the page. And so reading it kind of feels like this author's approach to that. Like there's just a lot of not a ton of words on the page, but big feelings, big conversation through minimal words dropped in different places on the page. So that's kind of what it reminds me of. But it's an interesting book so far.
So great. And that's going to be the Tuesday right after Labor Day. So we hope you join us Pacific time, 5:15 on Zoom. The best way to access that is to sign up on the website, whitewomenwakeup.com. And Jonelle will be sending out email reminders.
Yes, I will.
My reflection, I want to do a plug about the band book club because that's what my reflection is on. First of all, someone mentioned in our last meeting that the whole kind of, drug scene might trigger them.
Mm.
So I want to respect that.
Yeah.
And if you feel that any of these books may trigger you, you don't need to read the books to come and be part of our book club.
Yeah.
There's enough conversation that are simply prompted by the book that it's a safe community to be able to engage in some of these tough topics. And so one of the things I want to do a huge shout out to Malinda Lo, who wrote our last book last night at the Telegraph Club. This is my reflection for this week, is just the gift that she gave me in her writings to really walk alongside a young person in their coming out journey. And it's imprinted in my heart and what that looks like. And so I hope these, we have declared and we have said that one of the best ways we can develop empathy is by reading stories about others and what others' journeys are. And so our conversation was so uplifting, so encouraging, again, nuanced. We talk about that a lot in our podcast, just you and I, in general, how finding a safe space to have nuanced conversations is really healthy for us, and so that's my reflection. We didn't record last week, we
No.
did a re-release, and
Yeah.
so I just have been thinking about our book club a lot and how it meant a lot to me.
I
The people that showed up, I really appreciate your commitment.
Yes, I love that, and I think it's a great way, as you're saying, like, just show up. I think a big thing we talk about is community in this group and how important community is for discussion, for continuing to move forward with your learning journey, and so right now, this is the way that we can offer a community space, and so this is why we say it's not even about reading the book because we still getting great discussions, whether you've had a chance to read or not, and I don't think anyone in our book club is offended if you're not reading because there's still so many practical ways to engage in a conversation without having read the book. Now, reading the book is great. It'll still build, you know, continue to build your world. We love reading here, but like we understand sometimes you can't always read. My reflection, I am still reflecting on the last episode recorded, which was mine around the 13th Amendment, slavery, and how it's also given us the permission for what we're seeing with ICE detention centers. So I have another ICE fact for everyone, because again, I don't want us to become complacent to this, but I'm not sure if everyone knows the US government has deported detainees and undocumented immigrants. So be clear on those definitions, detainees and undocumented immigrants. That means not all of these detainees are undocumented immigrants. They have sent them to at least 26 nations where these individuals have no personal or legal ties. We have made deals with 26 nations to send individuals to their jails, their system. So Mexico is receiving a lot, but they're not always receiving Mexican citizens. Costa Rica, Panama, El Salvador, Belize, and Dominica. Then in Africa, Eswatini, Guinea, the Central African Republic, Ghana, Sierra Leone, South Sudan, and Uganda. And then we are also sending them to Moldova. So so this is all a law. Under US law, the Department of Homeland Security has been allowed to send non-citizens to a third country. And so think about that right there. You're already being detained for what is
Pulled from
not
your
even
family.
from your family, for which is just a civil disobedience and is not even considered a crime. Is it a civil disobedient like jaywalking, like running a stop sign? It is then being sent to a country where you have no ties, you don't speak the language, you know nothing of their system. And so this is where a lot of these detainees are disappearing in the system. So that is continued to be on my mind lately and I think the biggest way you can advocate is start supporting, the Council on Foreign Relations, start supporting advocacy groups, human rights that monitor these transformation of individuals. If you really want to get involved, if you want to do something, there are so many human rights places that will take your support, that will take your call centers, that will take you bringing things to detention centers. There's any job you can imagine, these they will take volunteers for. So please think about
You
that.
know, I'm just so glad that you keep bringing this up because one of our goals, or as we're moving forward with this podcast, is how do we see the humanness in one another? And this is like if we just tracked any of these people, they have families, they have lives, they have places to be, and then to be picked up randomly
Yeah.
and taken to places that are so strange and so uncomfortable, um, it's just difficult, and how
Yeah.
we walk into that space.
And
Thank you.
so one more quick context here. So numbers-wise, we have spent over $44 million as the US government to send over 22,000 people to 26 countries.
My gosh.
15,000
Just
of those people have happened within the last 6 months.
so just
Fif
think about that, $44 million divided by 26,000. I mean, we're spending enormous amounts of money on something that's hurting people,
Yeah,
not helping.
yeah.
Yeah.
15,000
Well,
people,
one
that
thing
is
I
the
wanna tell
size of a
you.
small college football stadium.
Yeah,
Again,
yeah. Yeah. One thing I wanna tell you that, I so appreciate you bringing this up. I was just reading an article about a gentleman who had voted for Trump the last 3 elections, and, his wife was picked up at church because she is, I think she may be Venezuela. I mean, I obviously she's documented, she has a
yeah,
green card, but she was picked up and detained and brought to a detention center for 22 days. It cost them thousands of dollars,
yeah.
and now she's out with she has one of those bands, those cuffs on
Yes,
her ankle, an ankle
yes,
cuff,
an ankle
and it
monitor.
made me think about our conversation we had
Yeah.
last week. Yeah.
And so for anyone who wants to look more into this, my sources are the Human Rights First org, so humanrightsfirst.org, and the Third Country Deportation Watch.org. So those are 2 things you can get involved with if you want. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Okay,
Yeah. Okay,
I'm
on to
bringing
your
my
topic.
topic. I saw there's 2 things that made me think of this topic.
Okay.
First of all, my husband and I, or your father, we have been watching The American Experiment on
Yeah.
Netflix, and it's been very interesting, and one of the things that I in
Can
my
you tell
book.
everyone what that is though on Netflix to give
It goes
context?
back to it's actually interesting. It's a very bipartisan documentary where they have people from both political parties that interject about the Constitution and civil discourse. And so, the American Experiment is about how we became a country. And so this one they were in the 1787, they were working on the Constitution, and within the Constitution, there's the framework of the Three-Fifths Act. So they were deciding, like, how people could have enough how each states could have the equal amount of political representation. Um, the Southern states at that time had obviously more Black people,
Yeah.
but they didn't want to give Black people the vote, but they wanted the power of the numbers that the Black people could offer because it would equalize then the Northern states. So one of the ways that the 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 framers, they call them, the people that framed the Constitution, compromised by coming up with this language of the three-fifths. So each Black it took, for every 5 Blacks, people or each Black counted as three-fifths of
Just
a
one
person.
person. Yeah.
And then this worked for voting and well, not even voting, it worked at that time for taxation and
Yeah. I was about to say because they still Black people still didn't have the right to vote, so it
yeah,
did.
they didn't have the right to vote.
Yeah.
So, anyways, it made me think about this notion of compromise. So that was this theme on there because, and then what happens when we compromise and the long-term effects of this compromise. But the other theme that I thought about was
Which
this
can we
language.
pause for a second to
Yeah.
just even, like, sink in and talk about a how that is a compromise? Like, I think,
Yes.
like, their perspective of, like, dehumanizing I mean, like, first of all, it is still so incredibly baffling to me to look at a human being and not and these white people not consider this Black person in front of them a human being, like,
Yeah.
not even
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
on and then to compromise that they are 3/5 of a human being.
Yeah.
It's still I
And the
just kinda
reason
wanna
it
I just wanna level set because I feel like sometimes
yeah.
when we talk about history, like, it feels so far ago, it feels so like, abstract,
It's
and
not
it's
abstract
like
because we just redistrict the voting laws, so it's not
totally.
abstract,
No,
it's
but I mean,
still
but I guess,
the
like,
same
what
conversation.
I guess in my mind, like, when I'm hearing these things, it's, like, stuff you've heard in history, it's over and over again,
Yeah.
that I just wanted to sit for a second and think about, like, just the audacity and the senselessness of what white people have done to humans throughout history.
Yeah.
It is
Well,
just
and if you don't one of the things that's, probably a little challenging of our podcast, some of these things, if you don't know the three-fifths law, look it up. It's pretty
yeah,
well documented, and it had to do, again, with, counting populations so that each state could be represented in a more equal
yeah,
way, and this was something to the northern states within the United States compromising with the southern states, and that was part of the language of civility because there was a lot of argument, you can
yeah.
imagine,
Oh,
people that
yeah.
didn't believe in it and that people that wanted it differently. And so, the consequence of that is the dehumanization of Black human beings to consider them only three-fifths of a human
Yeah.
being. And
Oh,
if
yeah.
you talk to any Black community, this, historical compromise has had long-term effects.
Yeah.
So that's not what my topic is,
Totally.
but it's
Sorry,
a
I that
topic.
was a derailment. I just had to sit with that for a second. Yeah.
No, I'm glad you did because a lot of times when we introduce something,
Yeah.
we've already gone beyond the research of that and into something else. So but I think research it because if you don't know it, you need to know it. So, but one of the things that they were trying to do within that compromise is to work within a civil society,
Mhm.
civility. And so the other thing, so we were watching this Netflix show, and then I subscribe to Inside. It's a website blog, Inside Higher Education, and they were talking about courses in civility, more higher academic spaces are doing courses in civility, especially as we're trying to figure out how to have conversations about voting.
Interesting.
Now,
Okay, can I
you
ask a
read that,
question?
you hear that,
Yeah.
and you think, "Oh, that's really good." Like, this is what I thought. Not you
Okay.
maybe,
I
but
was
this
about to say, no, this is exactly what I thought. I was like, is this a way for universities to kind of, like, get around the DEI name? Like, are they trying to have more
no.
diversity and discussion? Okay, okay, let me know then what it is.
So the good part is to try to train young people about having civil conversations.
Yeah.
How do we be civil? And yet again, both you and I, as we've done this podcast, know that there's a lot of nuance there because does that mean we compromise like that three-fifths law
Yes.
that really hurts someone? So
Or
there's been some research into
or
the backing of these civil
okay, wait, can I jump
classes.
in? Or even as we've seen so often in conversations, there's not even a level set of fact versus opinion. And we're now asked to be civil to accept people's opinions as fact when they're not actually
With
fact. Interesting.
so, well, what's
Oh, this
interesting,
is really
going
interesting.
a little deeper of a dive
Yeah.
on this article, which was interesting because it's essentially it is about bringing this kind of discourse. But the counter narrative to that is these courses are being endorsed and backed by institutions that are policing language, that are policing protesting, that are policing, um, disagreement and discourse. And so it's weird because we're almost doing the same kind of thing again, right? We're
Yeah.
saying let's be civil for the sake of being civil. Let's create this space of compromise. We're not going to do protests when in fact protests are a way in which we speak to something we disagree. So
Yeah.
those were the 2 things that
It's
got me
interesting
into the conversation of civility,
it's
and
interesting you say that. So
started my
I
research.
okay.
Yeah, go
So
for it, Jen, you start.
I read an article this week too, and I was just double checking if anyone watching YouTube saw me typing, of making sure that it was the university that I thought it was. So Carnegie Mellon has this tradition called the Fence. Have you heard about this?
No.
So it's a big, like, wall that's kind of this, stone fence wall across their campus, and they've had a tradition for years. I think it was, like, since the it's since, like, 1923. They've been painting it's their way to express free speech. So every year, the students go on and put they paint this wall with free speech. It's theirs, whatever they wanna paint. This year, they wrote what did they wrote? They said something with, you know, "Down with racism, down with, oh, what did it say? Down with sexism, down with all of this." And they also said down with Zionism. And I don't know if down was the word, but it was like, get rid of it was something along the lines of like, we need to you know, remove capitalism, remove racism, remove
Yeah.
sexism, remove all that and remove Zionism. And Carnegie Mellon painted over Zionism. And so the students cried out, like, "This has been
This
our
is yeah.
ability for free speech," and they've said so many things over the years that it was interesting that this, for the first time, is where the university drew the line. Was
Well,
yeah,
it's funny. This is getting me off topic, but that's what we do. You
yeah,
know, one of
but
the
it was
things that
about
I've learned
civility because they
but
were
real quickly, one of the things that I've learned is half the time I don't understand what some of these words mean. So, like
yeah,
I was getting down with you earlier on in our episodes about patriarchy because I kept equating patriarchy to just
mhm,
white men, when in fact what you're saying is it's patriarchal values
yes,
at institutions that
yes,
we're arguing, not the person. And I
yes.
haven't like, right now, I haven't looked up Zionism, but I do know a little bit of the history in the mid 1800s or the early 1900s, this notion of, um, take Jewish communities taking over spaces, or going back, and so I'd imagine, like the word ableism, people
Okay,
are
so this is all what
confused.
it's so
Okay,
this
what
is
does
what it said.
Zionism mean?
So it said no, this is what it said. It said death to capitalism, death to racism, death to sexism, free Palestine, and death to Zionism.
Okay, so
And so
what is the can you
and so
you
but I
can
think
dissect it.
this is your
Yeah,
point is the individuals are getting mad that they feel like it's anti-Semitic. But
yeah,
what
when
we're trying to say, it's kinda like patriarchy, it's racism. People
it's
get
not
caught up
understanding the
feeling at the
term that
individual, but Zionism belief is that Israel has the right and Palestine does not. Israel has the
yeah,
right to be there and
yeah.
to wipe out Palestine.
So
And so
it's
it's
not
not
against
against Jewish people, but a
Israeli
lot of
people,
people
it's against the government
yes.
and the
Let
institution.
me find what
Okay,
it's the exact sorry. But it's just it goes back to the civil disobedience of, like,
yeah,
this was their whole thing is the standard so it says, "Because Zionism is both historical, it's a political movement, and it's a deeply personal ideology." And so
yeah,
this is where it kind of gets tethered together.
yeah,
But the standard definition from major authorities is that Zionism as an international movement focused on creating a Jewish nation in the home of Palestine,
yeah,
where therefore it became the state of Israel and home to all Jewish nation
yeah,
by kicking out Palestinians, by kicking out Muslims. And so this is where the disconnect is like when people say death to Zionism, it's death to the right to that land. It's
yeah.
not death to the Israelites or Jewish, but it's death to the right of kicking out
Yeah.
Palestinian Muslims
Or it's dead
were
to an ideology
yeah,
that says to kick out. It's
yeah.
like ableism. Ableism is the negative it's focusing more on people that are able to do things and discounting people that are not.
And so then
So
this is, they say, the debate, and I'll finish because I know I derailed. Pro-Zionist perspective is the view that of Jewish safety, self-determination, and connection to ancestral home. So having anti-Zionist views is views as a direct anti-Semitic threat, whereas anti-Zionists interpret Zionism as the political ideology
yeah.
tied to nationalism and displacement of others. And so that is again where
Yeah,
there's disconnect.
the nuance of the word. Yeah, the
Yeah.
did.
And
Yeah.
so back to
Yeah.
the civil disability is there's it's but so for the first time ever, the fence, what is called at Carnegie Mellon, was painted over. And
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. So I
So
want to go back to my topic because this is really interesting because when we look at the history of the word civility, it actually stems from a Latin word called civilis, relating to citizens, to public life. It's the same root as city and civic. Researchers who study this actually says it has two different dimensions. And I think this is where we get confused. One dimension is politeness. So,
yeah,
etiquette, manners,
yeah,
respect, consideration, social cooperation so that things run smoothly.
yeah,
That's one space of civility. The other space, so if we were really like tethering out civility, we'd always think about it with these two spaces. The other one
yeah,
is public mindedness. So treating others as free and equal members of society. It has two parts: moral civility, respecting people's fundamental rights, equal standing, refusing to justify political positions using only self interest or secretarian reasons. So, one of the things that when we start thinking about civility, we need to think about it in both frameworks. We need to think about it both in politeness and both in public mindedness.
yeah,
And when we think about it in politeness, though, and this is where it can get challenging, is are we then being the police?
yeah.
Are we policing behavior? Are we like when someone says, shh, or when someone says, you should act this certain way to be part of the civil community.
Which
So,
we've talked so many times, policing behavior is completely like, I mean, people of color have had their behavior policed their entire life.
entire
And
life.
we now see how white women are also just l really inherently, like,
And we
proponents of
police people
policing.
by trying to be polite
Polite,
when
but
in fact,
again, but kindness, we have different
yeah.
definitions of kindness,
Mhm.
kind of thing, and it's to break the uncomfortability that white women feel in dialogue and stuff,
Yeah.
but I loved how you broke that down of civility being the from a citizen perspective, from a
Yeah.
civil perspective, because I do think ultimately when people think about civility, I think that's more what we're wanting, or at least I feel like inherently what we're wanting is a place where people are civil to each other. But I see what you're saying, how civility has become also this policing
Yeah.
because people there's a lot of entitlement. We've been, given a lot more entitlement in this. I think people, especially politically, have been given a little bit more, what is the word? Emboldened with things. And so the view of when they're asking for civility, people are almost feeling like it's like against them as opposed to seeing how, I don't know, does that make sense? Seeing the
No, it
value
does because
in
they're using like, if we think about this definition, and this is why I wanted to bring up this topic because it's nuanced, right?
yeah,
Like, like, to be civil, I always think about it in the language of politeness,
yeah,
but I also need to think about it in public-mindedness. So,
yeah,
so one of the things that I why I brought up the civility of the Constitution, that making that amendment or the 3/5 rule is they did that out of civility. They compromised because they were trying to be
'Cause they
civil with
viewed
one
it as
another.
civil.
But was the outcome a good outcome? And this is what I think we need to weigh. So as I was thinking about this, one of so there's a scholar, let me talk to you about this scholar.
I love
Um,
that you're bringing this up because I do think for listeners, for new listeners, old listeners, and people who know us, know Karen is a Libra who loves to be conflict free. And so I think civility in your mind has always been
yeah,
peace at any price. You've talked about this peace at any price. So I love that you're bringing this up of like, wait, is peace at any price essentially the right thing to do? Because
yeah,
it's more harmful in the long term just
yeah.
because
Well,
I want to clear my uncomfortability in the moment.
and I think as white women, one of the things we might, and especially if your kids are going off to college this year, the language of the civility industrial complex, it's a contested term. So, but it's a term used by scholars consortium called uncivil. And it describes 185 campus dialogue and civic programs and the private funders behind them. So, what we need to think about are these private funders actually teaching us skills for tone policing
Yeah.
or tone of the protest rather than engaging in substantive conversations? Or are we actually learning productive disagreements across differences? Because I think that that is the ultimate, that we want these productive
Yeah.
disagreements,
Yes.
because there's no way we're not going to disagree. We're
Yeah.
human beings and we're very diverse, but we don't want to come up with a compromise like the three-fifths. So one of the things that I really like, this woman, Loretta Ross, she's a Black feminist scholar at, I think she's at Smith College, and she came up with the 5 C's continuum. She wrote a book called Calling In. So, she has some great YouTube channels where she talks a little, or YouTube videos where she talks about her initial protests as a Black woman were very angry, very
Yeah.
much about calling out, direct confrontation, calling out someone's harmful words. She also talks about the canceling, so this is part of the 5 Cs. This is like the most extreme calling out where the goal is to get someone fired, to deplatform someone.
Yeah.
So she talks a lot about her early justice work was calling out and canceling. What she found, because it was stemmed from anger, from blame and punishment,
Yeah.
that she never actually called anyone in to the conversation,
Yeah.
that it made people become defensive. And so,
But
she's
isn't that interesting? Because I think we see this all the time in this world of clickbait. Like
yes,
as I'm more the marketer for our podcast, so oftentimes do I want to try to find us like a clickbait title or a clickbait conversation, but that's not really who we are. But it
yeah,
is what gets attention. But I
yeah,
do think it's not it's not in the end. We know this is a long game. And so we're not here. I have to remind myself, we're not here for quick up and down fame. We're here to get spread a message long term and have great conversations. And so, but it is interesting. I do think people find that a lot that there's then not the substance when you're doing the hate, when you're doing the clickbait. It yeah, I don't know. It's low substance. So I can see, but I love that our book is now Call In. Like what a
yeah,
beautiful
calling
title.
in is the name of her
Calling it.
book.
What a beautiful title after so many years of calling people out. So I like that.
So these are the 5 Cs: canceling out what we talked about, and then or calling out, public shame, public confrontation, canceling, the goal is to get someone fired. Now, she's not saying that we shouldn't call out, we
Oh,
shouldn't cancel. This is really
100%.
important because this isn't an all or nothing thing. What I did hear her saying is that we need to see what our intention is. Are we blaming? Are we punishing? Are we trying withdrawing something from a person, which is
Yeah.
like their respect or pulling their relationships away? What is the consequence of that engagement?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the thing. So then the other 3 is she uses the language calling in, which is a call out done with love. Accountability sought through love and respect instead of anger and punishment. So even when we protest, protests are really important because we need to bring the topic to the center, but are we protesting to blame another group? Are
Mhm.
we protesting to shame or to punish? Or are we protesting so that we bring a civil society into this language of respect?
Well,
Then
it's almost
use
it oh.
oh,
It's
then
almost kind
keep
of
going.
like it's almost like the term like, when in an individual you're talking about groups, but, like, the individual term of active listening, like, it's so often, I think, when you're having discourse among people, it's so important to have active listening as opposed to listening to defend, listening
Yeah,
to educate, and so that's in my mind, what I'm kind of hearing from you is, like, where's your civility coming from?
yeah,
Is your intention for civility active listening, or is your intention for civility to, like,
police
defend, to police, to, like,
to
educate,
shut down.
to shut
Yeah,
down, to, like, throw your opinion out there? And it's not to say that your opinion doesn't matter, but everyone thinks their opinion matters, and
yeah.
so, like, in order to find a place of understanding and learning and again, I agree with what you're saying, it we know there's still a lot of bad and negativity out there, and so it's not saying give everyone a chance to stomp all over you or spew
Yeah.
hatred, but it's where's the line, and again, I think intentionality. Is that what you're saying, like, your own intention or what?
So the next one is so we
Oh,
talked about
sorry.
calling out, canceling, then calling in, which is, yes, be accountable, but
Yeah,
do it through love and respect. Calling on. So prompting someone to do better without the time investment of calling in or calling out. So calling on, prompting, this is a lower effort, but trying to prompt someone to think or do better. And I think
yeah,
that that's really and then she also says calling it off. So
yeah,
sometimes we need like you and I even we were talking about we have to give a podcast and we were kind of running through some of our answers. And one of the things that we've learned with each other is sometimes we need to temporarily halt something so
yeah,
we can understand where we're coming from. And I really I don't have the bandwidth to deal with this right now. Respect someone when
yeah,
they say it that way. I don't have the bandwidth. And you can always say, "I want to engage. I want your opinion matters to me, but right now I need to disengage." But I really think that I love the idea of part of civility. I think civility is both. It is being polite and not policing. It is being civic-minded and not and being concerned, does the compromise hurt the other human being? So, so one of the things that I also in researching this idea from Dr. Zuleka Zavala's tone policing people of color, that civility is not neutral and it's never been neutral. And when we think of it only from the politeness frame, we're missing out. That civility is actually a public-minded aspect. Where is the human rights of all human
got it.
beings?
Yeah,
So, I love that. So here's what is it I think one of the things that we wanna ask ourselves when when we're in language of civil discourse, or even if your kids come back and say, "I'm taking a civil discourse class," what are we doing with it? Are we shaming and blame? Are we moving forward with shame and blame? Are we moving forward with compromise that could end up hurting someone?
yeah.
Or are we being civil at the
Or are we
at the
genuinely
expense
learning
of police?
how to have civil discourse? Because I do also think if the intent is good, this is a class everyone could benefit from. Like,
Exactly.
genuinely, like, having learning how to have conversations with others you may not agree with. But I
Yes.
see what you're saying is as long as they're not talking about compromising for hurt, like just compromising
Yes.
for being sake. But I do think learning the language and learning how to have those conversations we talk about, we've learned so much on how to have good conversations with each other that I think those skills would benefit anyone. So I
Yeah.
love the idea as long as, like you said, the intention and the structure is correct.
Yes. Yes. So think of when you're thinking about civility, think about it from these two lenses. And think about civility isn't just if you're going to compromise, compromise so that it does not hurt someone because and think about the consequence of that compromise,
Yeah.
right? Where
Yeah.
does that land? So,
Yeah.
anyways, that was what I wanted to bring up today.
Love it.
Um,
I love it. I wanna go find a class though on these
well, good.
conversations in an accurate
This
way.
should
So,
spark us, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on White Women Wake Up. If today's conversation sparks something in you, a reflection, something to think about, please, please, please reach out, subscribe. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, Substack, TikTok, or at whitewomenwakeup.com. We'd love, love, love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening today.
A quick clip playback on where today's research came from. Our historical anchor in the Three-Fifths Compromise came from Britannica and the League of Women Voters. Um, the two dimensions of civility come from research published through the National Institute of Health, and the 5 C's and calling in framework came from Loretta Ross, Black feminist scholar and MacArthur Genius Fellow. The tone policing history came from Dr. Zuleka Zavelas and Adrian Murray Brown's We Will Not Cancel Us, shaped our accountability lens. All are linked in the show notes. Thanks for listening and keep waking up.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.